Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down an extensive heat wave that'll be impacting the United States throughout the week, shattering records across the United States. We'll also be discussing Tropical Storm Harold as it does make landfall in Texas, and we'll be discussing the severe weather potential throughout the week as there is a risk for severe weather as we head into Thursday. I'll be giving you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this weather forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. And we'll first begin with South Texas, and this is currently where we do have an area of convection. This is Tropical Storm Harold. It has just made landfall recently down in South Texas with sustained winds around 50 miles per hour, wind gusts up to 65 miles per hour, and this will be bringing a ton of rainfall over the next 24 hours to those in southern Texas. This will continue to move to the west. The reason why this is moving west-northwest is because of this massive heat dome, and this has been sitting over the central plains in the Midwest for several days now. And this is also why we had Tropical Storm Hillary go off to the north, is because of this rotation that is clockwise. That is really typical for a high pressure system, and that's why we're seeing this big rotation. It's like a ring of fire. That's the best way to describe it, with this being our death ridge, and this is what's going to be continuing to bring excessive heat to the United States over the next several days. Meanwhile, this tropical system will continue to move to the west, and unfortunately, it's not going to the north, which areas like North Texas desperately need rainfall. So unfortunately, it's not going that direction. And then anywhere else in the United States, we're still looking again at that ring of fire. We have some showers and a few storms on the outskirts of this ridge. Meanwhile, in the ridge, it's very hot, very humid, and we are seeing record-breaking temperatures in a lot of areas. Heat indices have been as high as 130 in places like Iowa and Kansas over the last several days, so it is very hot. And the National Weather Service has issued a boatload of excessive heat warnings and as well as red flag warnings. We have red flag warnings in effect across parts of Texas and Louisiana. That would be because of this tropical system bringing some gusty winds along with that. And then further to the north, excessive heat warnings stretching from Minnesota, Wisconsin, all the way back through Texas and Mississippi. Meanwhile, we do have heat advisories in effect in those orange boxes, which do outline a few areas. But again, this is what we're talking about, is a massive heat dome that is continuing to sit across a large chunk of the United States. And we really need to talk about this further because a lot of you are wondering, when is this leaving? When are we going to start to see cooler weather? We are getting awfully close to fall. I mean, we're only a week away from meteorological fall, which starts on September 1st. We have yet to see any big cold fronts in the United States, and we're going to start to probably see some soon. So let's kind of go through the jet stream here. Beginning with today, again, our heat dome is sitting here, very strong heat dome, and also further to the north, this is your jet stream, and it's also, again, a very strong jet stream right now. As we go throughout the next several days, things will begin to change. So once we go into Wednesday into Thursday, notice where this heat dome goes. It started here back up in parts of the Midwest and the upper levels, then it'll eventually move down closer to the southern plains. This will allow for that heat dome to move and basically migrate further to the south and west, which will allow for the threat for maybe some showers and storms and maybe even a potential for some severe weather in parts of maybe the Ohio Valley as we go into Thursday, which there is a risk of severe weather right now in those areas. Once we go into Thursday into Friday, notice we'll begin to watch another trough start to dip out of Canada. This will be moving this direction, so basically east, southeast, and southern Canada going toward Toronto, and it'll be in parts of the upper Midwest, and this will allow for some showers and maybe even a little bit of severe weather as we go into the later half of this week. Notice where the heat dome is by Friday. It is going to be centered down in parts of Texas. Once we go into Saturday into Sunday, this will continue to move back to the west, so it'll be actually more centered back over in parts of the western United States, so back down the Four Corner states. That is where the heat dome will be located by then. Jet stream will dip a bit, so this will allow for a cool down in parts of the northeast. So our first strong cold front likely for August, which we've already seen a couple, but this is going to be one of the stronger ones as we are getting closer to fall. And then once we go into next week, things do become more uncertain, but there is some hope that we'll see a pretty big dip in the jet stream, which could allow for some cool down parts of like the eastern tier of the United States, so maybe northeast of Texas. But again, things are a little bit more uncertain by then, but we'll talk about more on that later in another forecast. In terms of the temperature anomalies, this gives us an idea of above and below average temperatures. So this is above average, this is below average temperatures across the United States. And once we go throughout the week, things are going to start to change. So notice by Thursday, this is going to continue to shatter records in terms of heat. We'll continue to see excessive heat continue across parts of the Midwest, as well as the Great Plains and back through the Ohio Valley. By Friday into Saturday, this does shift further down to the south, and that is because of this cold front that'll kind of dip down to the south. This will allow for a cool down. Meanwhile, that heat dome basically will be moving down to the south toward the Gulf Coast, and that again will allow for some cooler weather. Once we go into the weekend and into early next week, again, cooler weather is likely to start to make an appearance in parts of like areas like Oklahoma and Texas. It won't be a dramatic cool down by any means, but there will be enough of a cool down for temperatures like North Texas, for example, to drop from like 105 to like 98. It's not going to be a dramatic cool down, but it will be enough to at least be noticeable in the atmosphere. And once we go into next week, again, things do become a bit more uncertain here across the United States. In terms of rainfall over the next 7 days, there will be some improvement for a large chunk of the United States, primarily as we get closer to the weekend. You will notice this has been a big circle, basically a white circle for the last several days in terms of rainfall, because there hasn't been any in the forecast, but that will change a little bit as we go into the weekend. There will at least be some scattered showers and maybe an isolated storm or two across the Great Plains and as well as in the Mississippi Valley, so there will be some improvements in that department. The Climate Prediction Center is issued over the next 6 to 10 days, so this is from Sunday, the 27th of this month, to the end of the month on the 31st. Below average temperatures are more likely than not in the northeast United States. Meanwhile, the western tier through the southern tier of the United States will continue with above average temperatures. Unfortunately, again, this heat dome is not really going anywhere anytime soon, but it will start to move finally. I mean, it's been sitting in the central plains and the Midwest forever. It'll move down to the southwest United States. Again, that'll allow for a bit more of a cool down. For the first week of September, below average temperatures more likely than not in the northeast. Meanwhile, again, above average temperatures likely in parts of the southern United States, really anywhere in the Great Plains, it's more likely than not. In terms of precipitation, below average precipitation is expected through the rest of this month in parts of the Midwest. This does not include, though, the rest of this week. It only goes from Sunday, the 27th, through the 31st. So that below average precipitation is likely there. And then heading into the first week of September, again, below average precipitation is expected across a very large chunk of the United States, from anywhere from southern Texas back through the northeast. And then above average rainfall is probably at least going to occur across parts of the northwest United States, so near Washington, but other areas have a slightly higher likelihood than not of seeing above average precipitation. So some good news there if you do need rainfall. Areas like Southern California don't need any more rainfall after Tropical Storm Hilary from yesterday and the previous day. Now, in terms of what we're looking at in Texas with Tropical Storm Harold, it has made landfall in southern Texas. The organization is just south of Corpus Christi by about 50 miles. Moving to the west, again, precipitation is going to come out of this over the next several hours. Notice over the next several hours, heavy bands of rain will enter the coast in southern Texas near Corpus Christi. Through the afternoon, rain will start to become more scattered, so not everybody will be seeing rainfall. Heaviest of the rain will be going toward areas and along the Texas and Mexico border, and eventually as we go into the evening hours, there will be still some isolated showers, maybe a storm near Corpus Christi. Can't rule out an isolated tornado, but the threat overall will be low for today. It is primarily going to be through the early to mid-afternoon hours, and then it should be a lower after then. Here's the total precipitation being estimated by the HRR model. Again, the heaviest rain is likely to be south and west of Corpus Christi, but even near Corpus Christi, we could be talking about 1 to 3 inches of rainfall with those heavier bands. Isolated spots between 2 to 4 inches, and maybe a couple spots getting closer to 6 inches of rainfall could occur out of the very heaviest of bands. Notice the HRR model picking up on maybe an isolated location closer to 7 inches of rain, which is not out of the question, but it will be a very isolated risk overall. And then going into tossing trampolines on tall trees Thursday, we do currently have a marginal risk of severe weather in parts of the Ohio Valley back through the Midwest, and we will be talking about more on this in our next forecast. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.